Okay, so most recent video we talked about the growth of economy and the buildup of trade, and how it led to a lot of increase in wealth and a lot of other things. But it also leads to some major issues. And probably the biggest negative that comes out of this is what's known as the Black Death or the Black Plague. Okay, the trade routes carry more than goods; they carry disease from other parts because they piggyback kind of on top of the caravans and everything else. And the most famous of these is the bubonic plague or Black Death. It got its name from the purplish or blackish spots it produced on the skin. During the 1300s, starting in the late 1340s, this epidemic strikes Asia, North Africa, and Europe, and approximately a third of the population of Europe dies. Travels begins in Asia, and travels the Silk Roads, which we will be talking about, and to Europe. Okay, 1331 it begins in China. 1347 a fleet of Genovese merchants arrived in Sicily carrying the plague. The disease spread from Italy to Spain to France, Germany, and England. Before it's over, it kills 25 million Europeans and an additional 25 million Asians. So how does this happen? First, let's talk about some extra outbreaks. Okay, so it comes back. Isn't it completely wiped out? It still appears now and then today. Some kind of differences based on geography. Milan, which is in northern Italy, is spared of the plague. Bristol, England, is nearly wiped out. It ends feudalism in many places because so many people die, there's nobody left to work the farms and the fields. And the survivors flee to the cities of Venice, Florence, London, and Paris, which is kind of surprising because you'd think they'd want to get away from the cities because the cities where people live so close together. You'd think this is where they wouldn't want to be because they'd want to be away from people, but for some reason people flock to cities. Okay, the only people who really survive the plague in any substantial number are Jews. And this is often attributed to some of the religious ideas that go around Passover, especially the house cleaning methods of Purim before Passover. Okay, basically before Passover, Jews are supposed to go through and throw out everything in the house and clean the place and disinfect it from top to bottom. And because they had done this every spring before the weather really warms up, the rats don't come to their houses because there's no filth around to live off of, and they are able to avoid the plague. This does have some retribution effects because people look at the fact that the Jews aren't touched by the plague and they say, oh, the Jews must have caused this, they must have cursed us with it, and they use it as a way to persecute, and another way to persecute Jews. Okay, so a map here showing the spread. So you can see the very dark green is where it comes from. Okay, over here it comes across Asia through the Crimea, over to Constantinople, follows the red lines into Italy, and then eventually following the trade routes around, as you can see, it moves farther north, eventually into Greece and other areas. But you can see those dots of yellow. Some areas, for some reason, survived without the plague ever touching it, even though they were on the trade routes. Just never happened. Okay, lots and lots of effects. One of the big ones is the prestige of the church suffers because people prayed that the plague would end and it didn't end. Priests and members of the church leave the church. You also have, it doesn't play favorites. Everybody dies, and if there's no priests around to keep things going, it tends to fall apart. Huge labor shortage leads to higher wages. The manorial system falls apart because serfs realize that there's money to be made elsewhere and they run away. And the nobles aren't able to keep them there because they're infected with it. As I mentioned before, the Jews are blamed and they're driven from their homes and often massacred because of this. Okay, kind of an example, someone praying and what people looked like when you can see that what are known as the buboes, these welts that erupt all over your body. Okay. Popular nursery rhyme that some of you may be familiar with. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. Ashes to ashes, we all fall down. This is actually, even though it's a children's nursery rhyme, it's a metaphor on the Black Plague. Okay, we will talk in much more depth on the plague in class. Okay, so what I'd like you to write down for class: where did the plague originate, and what were two effects? That's it for now. Just a short one today.